Hi, this is Varun and Nisha from The Edge with another episode of Quick Take. For our guest today, we have Sidhu, who is an engineer by training, a manager at a high technology company by profession, and an entrepreneur at heart. Sidhu, for the last 30 odd years, has been developing software for fun and profit, and his last startup, C42 Engineering, was actually acquired by GoJek in 2015. Because of Sidhu's background and his rich experience around, developing software and everything, we decided to pick Sidhu's brains on some of the recent events that have been happening around hiring developers. Nisha, over to you. Why don't you, start today?
Yes, thank you, Varun, and so excited to have you here, Sidhu. You probably are one of those. We are really lucky that we have you here today to kind of talk about and deliberate. This entire move of developer hiring. Why has it become a thing? Why are brands being so excited? Brands giving away large goodies, right? You can't even call them goodies anymore. They literally are giving away gadgets and vehicles now. So Situ, let's dive right in. What do you think is the motive for companies and startups to kind of create such campaigns, create these kind of make this kind of noise for hiring developers? And what's your take really on this entire thing?
Well, Nisha, thank you for having me on. This is not the first time this has happened. This was there's a famous story from the 2000.com boom where some company was giving out BMW Z3s to every hire. So I think this is a phenomenon that keeps popping up every time you have severe demand supply issues. And I think if you look at the rate at which investments have been increasing, especially venture type investments in India and the India Southeast Asia region, we're looking at like 5,000 new positions opening up every year, easy, and rising. And there is just no supply of talent to fulfill that demand. So what that means is you're having exponentially more money and exponentially more companies that are backed by that money looking for a pool of talent that is growing at a linear rate. So the moment you have exponentially growing demand and linearly growing supply, you're going to start seeing strategies like this one, like what we're seeing in the market today, in an attempt to capture that talent.
Which is super interesting. But then when companies sort of go out on a limb and try to out budget the other competition in terms of hiring the best talent around software development, who do you think is the exact target audience that they're trying to capture at this moment?
I think that's a great question. I think that a lot of these tactics, because these are really like very tactical moves that you make on a quarter to quarter basis to fill numerical targets, right? A lot of these tactics tend to be very poorly segmented, uh, and this has been my common observation. And the reason for this is most of these tactics are not designed by the same segment. What I mean by this is most likely such a campaign is designed by someone in HR or recruiting, and it isn't designed by a marketing expert, and it isn't designed by an engineer. And I mean, in the case where you're talking about targeting engineers, right? Ideally, what you would need over here is to get someone who's an expert in marketing and to have them collaborate with someone who really understands what good engineers are looking for, and have them come up with a campaign, and based on that decide what your tactics are. Are you giving away freebies, or is it about a narrative or whatever? But the moment you end up with a pure external sort of a perspective, then it just boils down to trying to be larger than life, and that can actually blow back, because the real deal is that all the actual experts in the market, irrespective of experience in years, all belong to a certain type of in-group, and that in-group is very particular about working with other people from the in-group. It's very straightforward. Like, as an engineer, you don't want to work with other engineers who are mediocre, because your life becomes hell, right? Every other engineer on your team who's incompetent is going to increase the number of bugs, increase the number of downtimes, increase the number of times in the middle of the night you've got to get up to go on production support, and you just don't want to deal with that. So what automatically happens is, if you segment this badly, you end up rejecting the competent engineers, right? If you take a pure FMCG type approach to the marketing, then it is actually deeply counterproductive, because you are actually rejecting your targets.
So that brings us actually nicely to this question on, how do you think they will retain some of this talent, Sidhu? You were also mentioning, right, that in engineering circles, can you talk about how the real target audience has taken this campaign? I mean, at least for, for people like Varun and me, we were thinking we should become developers too, but what's the real scene out there?
Honestly, well, there's two or three perspectives, right? I have not run any polls myself, but I know people who have. And by and large, most of the people, like this is all anecdotal information, but by and large, every engineer that was polled just laughed the whole thing off, right? Because, I mean, you're an engineer, you know how numbers work. If you want a bike, you'll pay for it out of your salary, right? What you're going to negotiate is your salary. So all of these things don't really move the needle for someone who's in the know. Is that simple? Like, this is basically going to be attractive to very inexperienced people, and very inexperienced, not just at engineering, very inexperienced at understanding how compensation works, which basically means people who are like very recently out of college. Like, anyone else is going to be like, listen, just put it into my payroll. I will decide what I want to buy, right? Just add it on top. Like, don't, like, you are not saving any money by gifting these things, right? In fact, given that at GoJek we had done all of this for in a different era, we'd given away a Harley as part of a hackathon back in the day. It turns out that the complexities of the taxation around this are actually not worth the effort. It is actually much easier to just give the person the money, right? So it's impractical also. So the TLDR there is, any experienced person, and by experienced I mean who's been working for more than a couple of years and who knows how compensation packages work, is not going to really be impressed by this, right? Because for them, they understand that they can buy whatever they want with the money they earn. There's no hassle there. And for much more senior people, you're talking about people who, are in their 30s or their 40s, who have kids, exec level people. This kind of stuff is just off-putting, right? Because it just doesn't fit with the kind of expectations they have. So you end up actually skewing your cohort completely down towards people who are very, very inexperienced professionally, not even engineering, just professionally inexperienced.
Very interesting. So, given the fact that yeah,
Sidhu, but how do you retain them? Just the other part of that question. Just let
Retention is always the same set of golden rules, right? Good work, good company, good money. If you're doing good work, or surrounded by good people, and you're getting paid good money, you're going to be retained. It's that simple. Like, none of this affects any of that.
got it. So, what has your own experience been with terms of running marketing campaigns, for example, to attract the best and the newest talent in the market, for your brand or for something for someone you've worked for before? I mean, I know that you're an avid biker yourself. So, how did you probably go about hiring other bikers, for example, who were also into development?
Look, if you're trying to hire competent people, you've got to speak to their desire for competence, right? And whatever campaigns you run are going to have to reflect that implicitly. Sorry, what I was saying was, sorry, quick interruption, but it becomes very important to ensure that whatever campaigns you're running have a core backbone that expresses that competence in every respect. For example, there were a couple of videos that we did, targeting this intersection of bikers and programmers. And what we did was pick a leader in GoJek who was a super competent engineer and who was an avid biker. And then we designed a campaign around him, expressing the depth of his competence in both fields. Because competence speaks to competence, and that's what you want to do. And with engineers, it's as I mentioned earlier, it's not even something that is what do you call it, like a theoretical thing. It's a very practical thing, because if you're surrounded by other incompetent engineers, then the amount of workload that you deal with and the amount of pressure you are under dramatically increases. And nobody likes to be woken up by pagers in the middle of the night every night because incompetent people are making a mess of the stack, right? And being able to express these aspects is what draws talent. One example of this that I very avidly remember is when we were doing offline campaigns, we were doing billboards. One of the things that we did was to run ads that used the Clojure programming language's syntax in the copy, and to talk about Clojure. And everybody was pushing back on me saying, listen, why are you using Clojure? Nobody uses Clojure. Like, it's not a popular language. The largest, deepest pools of talent are not Clojure programmers by far. Why aren't you using something much more popular like Java or PHP or whatever? And my response to that was, every good engineer knows what the next level of toolchain looks like. All good engineers aspire to work with good toolchains, and Clojure is a very, very strong toolchain. So we're not saying that you need to have Clojure experience. We're not saying that we are only targeting Clojure programmers. What we're saying is we're telling engineers that we pick good tools. That's what we're telling engineers. It has nothing to do with trying to target Clojure programmers. It has everything to do with targeting good programmers. Whether they are Clojure programmers or not is not the point.
That brings me to a comment and a question, Sidhu. So I'm a little intrigued, right? What the comment is, that people perhaps know your also. I mean, see, you I think somewhere are a model for a lot of this, Sidhu, and to say that
Now
it's a
you're
little
making Shy to come for me.
no, it's
This is
true.
full
And
Shy is coming.
no, Sidhu. No, I know you're very humble. But what I'm saying is that somewhere you have created a lot of templates, maybe knowingly and unknowingly, right? And there was this tweet also yesterday where somebody was like, "Oh, they possibly saw your Twitter cover and they were like, oh, this is the best way to attract engineers. Or this is what an engineer should look like." But having mentioned that, I think what I want to ask you is, even you mentioned biker and engineer. Is that really, like, is there a connect between these two, or is it just that it's an image you want to portray? It's a genuine question, not making fun of anything here.
No, I think, look, I think this has very strong analogs to the Clojure campaign that I just mentioned, right? I think it's less about being a biker and more about demonstrating that there is interest in other things. All good engineers tend to have like an otaku-ish tendency in them, right? They will have their areas of interest outside of coding, and they tend to go super deep. And this could be in terms of mechanical engineering, this could be in terms of baking, it could be whatever. But they will usually pick something that has complexity and challenge, right? And I think the important thing here is to design campaigns that speak to an engineer's desire to attack complex challenges and to tackle them. Whether it's riding a motorcycle fast, or baking the perfect loaf of bread, it doesn't matter. The idea is to appeal to the inner otaku in every good engineer.
I see what you're trying to say. So, one of the things that we spoke about earlier as well, one of the things that you highlighted was the fact that when such events happen, aggressive marketing campaigns happen towards hiring developers, usually because some demand supply imbalance happening. So, which gets me to two questions, and sort of the last questions for this quick take is the fact that, one, is there a data-driven approach to sort of assess these tech imbalances that you spoke of earlier? And if there is, and if there isn't, then how do you align tech talent hiring to sort of the broad economic vision of the company?
Look, it's impossible to have any kind of even semi-objective data upfront, right? In most of these cases, the work that anybody has done tends to be behind an NDA in their previous companies. The number of engineers who demonstrate capability through open source is very small. And that means that for most good engineers out there, you have no external signals on which to lock on to determine competency. And interviews are terrible. I mean, interviews are, if you'll forgive my phrasing it that way, interviews are just the least shitty option we have, but they're still a shitty option, right? There's very little you can figure out from a few hours of interview as to how an engineer will perform in production, as we phrase it, right? Everything. What matters is how things work in production. And I don't think there is an easy answer to this. And what is worse is that the systemic imbalance is only going to worsen, because it takes years for an engineer to become an engineer, and it's not about getting an engineering degree. Especially in tech, an engineer's mettle is measured by production experience, right? And production experience in different contexts and at different scales. And that takes time, and that takes exposure, and there's no way to replicate. And what that means is that if you want an engineer with 5 years worth of, and I'm not a fan of using years of experience, so I'm just using it as an indicative number, right? But you want someone with 5 years of production experience, it's going to take 5 years, right? There's no amount of pre-education you can do in college or in boot camps or whatever that can create production experience. The sandbox isn't reality. That's how I like to put it. You want real world experience, you cannot create real world experience in any kind of sandbox. So what this means is, this is like, buying a whiskey or a wine. You want an 18-year-old whiskey, it's going to take 18 years. There's no way to accelerate that. Okay, fine. With engineers, human beings trainings, maybe we can, reduce the 18 years to 15 years or to 12 years. But there is a hard limit. You're not bringing it down to 6 months. No way. So this imbalance is going to widen and widen very, very, very fast over the coming years into a very painful extreme. And I think we're already seeing that. If we see the salary numbers going out and these marketing campaigns, we can already see that the pain is there, and that people are trying to solve the pain through just paying more money and by running these kinds of marketing campaigns. But none of this stuff is going to solve the systemic issue. The systemic issue is there is a very small, slowly growing pool of competent engineers, and they will decide where they want to work, because all of them can get 5 offers on demand. So all of these things are not going to move the needle. What's going to move the needle is good work, good people, and good comp, right? That's it. That's what's going to move the needle.
Some very interesting food for thought indeed, which sort of brings us to the close of this quick tick as well. Sidhu, again, it was great talking to you, and the kind of insights you've shared is definitely going to make everybody think a lot and essentially look at this entire thing that's been happening more for bubble, but in also in a good way. The silver lining is the fact that with all of the aggressive salary numbers that are coming out, the way that people are sort of going out of their ways to hire, it'll also bring in a sort of a new discipline in terms of what's going to be accepted, as a good developer, as a bad developer, as all of those things. Like, for example, the one that you mentioned about, production time, the amount of time that this person's worked actual in the production instance, right? For example. So it was brilliant again talking to you again, Nisha. It was great hosting with you this as well. This is the Edge podcast. Thanks again. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel as well and follow us on LinkedIn for the latest updates around this. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sidhu.